Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I've got an exciting new tutorial for you guys, right? So as you can see on your screen, we are going to be making this looping animation today. And this basically can be used in many ways. Like, for example, you can just use it as a background in your trailer that you're making, or a short video, or a short animation that you want to create. Or if nothing else, you can actually just go ahead and use it as a live wallpaper on your desktop, right? So I really hope that you take something useful by the end of this video. And before we start, I just want to call it out that this video concept was actually taken by, or it's actually inspired by another YouTuber, that's Ducky 3D, from one of his videos that he made. So I'm gonna be linking down his channel in the description below, so in case you guys want to check it out. Now, also, I would like to call it out that in case you guys do end up creating something similar or even something different, right? Please do tag me on any of the social medias. I'm probably available on almost all of them. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to see your work. Uh, all the descriptions for my Insta, Twitter, Reddit, it's all in the description of this video. So don't forget to check that out. All right, then, without further ado, let's get right into it. All right, so to start with this, we're going to click on File, New, and General, and the setup comes up. What we're going to do is we'll delete everything else except for the cube, because we don't need them right now. Uh, before we make that loop, we have to create those objects that were actually creating those animation, right? So let's quickly go ahead and animate a few objects. For this tutorial, I'm just gonna go with two. You can add as many as you want, but yeah, just make sure that so the number of objects that you add is gonna slow down your computer that much, right? So if there are just way too many objects, you're gonna just be sitting there for a while before you render your animation. So just make sure that you're limiting it, and even the editing that you're actually putting in your objects, you're limiting to that, right? So I'll be making structures similar to a building. So let's just try and do that. So the first thing I'll do is I'll scale it on y-axis. Just make it a little bit larger, and just to make sure that I'm actually keeping it proportional, I'll just use these grid lines that are there. Like, can you see these lines? Just making sure that my object is within those parameters, right? So now it's a perfect rectangle kind of thing that we have. So first thing I'll do is I'll add some loop cuts in here, right? What we'll need that for is just to create some basic structures. Now I'm just trying to make sure that I have equal divisions for each of these loop cuts, which I think I do. Yeah. So yeah, I think this should be good enough. So I'll just quickly go to the face selection mode and select, let's say, these two random loops here, right? And let's go ahead and do E for extrude, S for scale, and just scale it down a little bit. Yeah, I think that looks good. Let's do a little bit more. Yeah. Now the second thing I'll do is I'll select these two loops as well and hit I for inset. We don't want the entire thing to be inserted, so I'll hit I again. And hold on. Before I do that, let's apply scale. Let's hit I for inset again. Okay. And E for extrude. Now it's again happening like in a weird way. So we want to make sure that we change this transform pivot point to individual origins. Now let's do E for extrude and S for scale. Well, actually, not S for scale. Just E for extrude and just bring it down a little bit. Right. In addition to that, we'll also go ahead and right click subdivide, do I for inset again. Right, and yeah, let's just bring it out a little bit here. Okay, let's do I for inset again and do E for extrude. Now this time we're gonna bring it in. All right, this looks good enough. Now, just to make sure that you guys are able to see it, I'll go to matcap and just switch on shadows and cavity. just make sure that those edges looks a little bit better in this, right? So once we are done with this, let's go ahead and select these loops as well. And in case you're wondering, just to select the loop, all you do is click on Alt and then left click at the edge, and it automatically selects the entire loop, right? And yeah, so let's do I for inset again, E for extrude, yeah, and I for inset, E for, I want to bring it out, yeah. Cool. This looks like a decent structure to me. I'll just bring this out a little bit for extrude. It looks like a decent structure, right? And we are not trying to create something extensive. It's just things are gonna just fly by real fast. So we won't really get a chance to look at the details of each object, and that's totally fine. So the first one is done, and I'll just create another object and make it a little bit more random. So E for extrude, E for extrude. Let's do ES, and let's select this loop. Let's go ahead and hit subdivide. I for inset, E for extrude. This looks good enough. Now let's yeah, I think this should work fine. Just gonna select these and these, right? And hit I for inset, E for extrude. Bring it out a little bit. Okay, cool. So we are done with both of our objects now, and they're pretty much ready. Let's go ahead and hit Control A and apply the scale. And the reason we are applying the scale again and again is just to make sure that when we apply textures, right, it applies evenly and not just stretches out anywhere. So let's go to the shading tab and we'll start shading. I'll just close this out so that we can have a little bit more room to look at what I'm doing. Oops. Okay, so we are just going to create one texture and we'll use in both of it. So the first one is, let's make it metallic. Let's bring the specular up and let's make it more reflective. So I'm going to bring down the roughness to 0.1. And yeah, that's done. The next thing that I'll do is bring down the base color. So somewhat around 0.15, I think should be good enough. Yep. Now, in addition to that, let's go ahead and add a texture, and we're going to add a brick texture here. So what we are doing is we are making an illusion of having bricks on a building. So let's add a brick texture, and let's go ahead and add a vector bump node, and we'll take the factor here, put it in the height, take the normal from this and put it in normal. So can you see there's already brick-like structures that are showing up here? Now, before we even apply this texture, we're gonna go ahead and select both of these, go to the edit mode, hit all, then click on U, that's for UV unwrap, and click on Cube projection. Now, UV unwrap is basically, there's a UV editing tab here. What it does, it basically projects your 3D texture into a 2D space, which helps your textures get assigned in a better way, right? Like for example, right now there's a brick texture here, but this is entirely plain, which just looks odd, and here it's stretched, so we don't want that. And so for that, we are actually going to use the UV projection to go ahead and make it visible. I'll bring down this trend to 0.8 and I'll invert it, because right now the edges are getting edges are being projected as like heightened, and the other thing was inside. So I just wanted to make sure that it was the opposite, right? Now, since I have the Node Wrangler add-on installed, I'm just gonna go ahead and hit Control T, and I get these two nodes as the mapping node and texture coordinate node. I'll go ahead and take the UV input or the UV coordinates and go ahead and add it to my vector here. Now, as soon as I do that, you can see that it automatically is projecting those bricks in an even way, right? There's no difference in here. So let's bring up the scale a little bit. Okay, and just to make sure that we have a little bit more uneven distribution of it, I'll add another texture. Let's go for a Veranoid texture. Let's add it here, right between the texture coordinate and the mapping node. As you can see, it's already splitting it up. Now let's change it to Chevy Chev. Yep. And what we're going to do is we don't want this entire, we don't want this texture to be taking up the entire way we are applying the brick texture on it, right? We don't want it to affect the entire object. So for that, I'll add mix RGB node. So let's go to color and mix RGB. I'll add it here. I'll take the UV coordinate and add it into color 2, right? So now what it's doing, it's actually applying both of it together. And we have a better, nice looking texture over here, right? Now, once we are done with these two things, what we'll do is we'll create those small lights to give it an illusion that there are some windows that are actually on, that have lights on, right? So just give it a better look of a proper building, you can say. So for that, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and go to texture and add a brick texture once again. And we'll take this brick texture and add it to emission. As soon as I do that, see, everything is just glowing, which we don't want. So I'll go ahead and add a color ramp in here just to control the amount of glow that I'm adding to this. So let's, and actually I'll not take the color one, I'll just take factor because I want it to be black and white, right? So let's take that, let's bring it in. And yeah, before we even do that, let's hit Control T again. And let's make sure we are going with the UV coordinate over here as well, right? All right. Actually, sorry. Yeah, sorry. We have to take the color input. If we just take the factor, it's just gonna apply it to the edges, which we don't want. Let's take that and yeah, it looks like there are a few windows that are glowing. Let's bring up the emission strength to about 10. Okay, this looks good enough. Let's bring it in a little bit more. I think this one's probably gonna need a different texture, right? So let's name it brick texture. I have no clue why it has a different kind of scale when it comes to applying the coordinates, but let's make sure that we are just create a different texture for it so that it has a proper brick looking shape here, right? So I'll just click on this new texture here so it copies out the original texture. So I did that. Let's increase the scale, right? And for the emission as well, let's increase the scale so that gives that illusion. Okay, so we are almost done. Now, just to make sure that the windows are actually glowing, right, we can go ahead and add the ambient occlusion in the render settings. You add ambient occlusion, bloom, and make sure that you are in the EV render engine, right? Screen space reflections. I always have trouble saying that, and we don't want motion blur, so let's keep that as it is. So yeah, we have the windows ready. Now we can actually change the color of the window. I'm just gonna go ahead and color it slightly bluish, right? And let's go to the render settings. This looks good. Let's give it a little bit of variance in the color, right? Just so that it looks a little different. Okay, cool. We have the buildings ready. So now we're gonna go ahead and create that loop. So let's just bring it to the side so that we can create that loop. For that, I'll go ahead and add a cylinder, and I'll rotate it on the y-axis. So we'll do RY90, sorry, x-axis, RX90, and now we have this cylinder looking thing. Now we'll go ahead and delete both of these faces, and yeah, it just gives you a good circle where you're actually like you can put your camera in between this and just go through it like that. And we'll be doing a few more things just to make it look like a loop, but we'll go through it in a second, right? Before we do that, let's do right click, shade smooth. Go ahead and add a modifier, and I'll add a solidify just to give it a little bit more depth here. And yeah, auto smooth just to make sure it's not smoothing weirdly process. So what we'll do is we'll go to particle properties that you see here, these three lines, and hit new, right? So as soon as I do that, there are two options here, emitter and hair. We're going to go with hair, and let's increase the number of seeds to 2. It gives a little bit more randomness. Now in source, we will go ahead and change it to random, right? And then click on render and change this from path to collection. Right now it's not showing anything, and that's because we have to add these two things in a collection. And to do that, all you can do is just click on M, new collection. Let's say buildings. Now let's click on OK. As you can see, both of these cubes are added to a different collection altogether. Now let's go back to our cylinder. Go to collections, like go to render, collections, and then this collection, and then select our buildings collection. Now as soon as I do that, can you see automatically added those buildings in here, but it's way too many. So let's reduce it to 100 and reduce the scale a little bit. Let's go with 0.035, right? And let's increase the randomness. Well, actually, we can increase the scale to 0.04. All right, and let's increase this to 200. Since we have actually, let's keep it to 150. Yeah, this looks reasonable enough. Now I'm gonna go ahead and apply this particle settings to all of our cylinders, right? So hit add, go ahead and select that particle, set add again, same process. Now just make sure that I'm deleting those new ones that I create, but I'll do that later, just to make sure that we are like aware of the amount of time that we are investing. Okay, so I figured out the problem. Apparently it is the shadows and the cavity that I added. Since it's way too many objects, the computer had to do a lot of calculations at the same time, right? Just to make sure that it's able to show things. So it seems like that was just way too much for it. So it was causing my computer to slow down. So I had to just go with the normal viewport. So I'm going to go ahead and use that and just add these cylinders once again. Okay. I'll add like 9 for now. If I need more, I'll just add them later on. I don't want to utilize the time I spent making in this video. Like, let's add 10. Make it even. Yeah, so we got our loop pretty much ready, and let's go to the render view and see how it looks like. We don't have a camera, so let's make sure we're setting up the camera. To do that, all you need to do is just look at the view that you think is reasonable and just press let's add a camera, because I just remembered we deleted it, and then press Control-Shift-0. And as soon as and do Control-Shift-0 and snaps the camera to your view. And yeah, once it is done, to go back to the camera view, you just press 0, right? I'm just looking at a reasonable view that I think would be good enough for me to create that loop. So let's do, yes, this looks reasonable. Let's bring it to the center. a little bit more. Let's go back there, and we'll reduce the focal length to 25 millimeters. So this is basically just to define how wide your camera lens is or how small it is, right? So that's what we're doing right now. We're just making sure that our camera lens is a little bit wider because we want to see most of the things, right? And then enable depth of field because what it will make sure is just add a cinematic effect to blur the blur the things that are way too close to the camera. So yeah, it's that is done. So now we'll go ahead and add the animation into it, right? Because these things were moving. So let's go to the cube first and let's bring up our timeline. So we are already at frame 1, so that's good. Let's go back to it and we'll rotate it on Z axis. So when we do that, can you see it's already moving some things? Now let me go back to this normal view so that we have a better look at that. So yeah, can you see it's already moving things on the Z axis, right? So that's what we want. So let's put it to 0 and add a keyframe here, and we'll go back to frame 201. I just want it to be as a 200 frame long animation. So I'll go ahead and do 360, right? And just add it. Now, once you have done that, just select both of your keyframes and right click, and in the interpolation mode, just make sure it's set to linear. Because by default, what Blender adds is it adds the Bezier curve as your default interpolation mode, right? And what it basically does is that it starts slow, gets faster at the center, and then gets slower again, right? But we don't want that. We just want it to be even. So that's what we're gonna go with. I will add the same animation to the second cube as well. So let's go back to frame 1. Let's hit keyframe. Let's go back to frame 201 and let's do 360 again. And add the keyframe. Okay, so now we have our cube rotating really nicely. So, yep. So we have our animation ready. Now, I think it still looks a little bit smaller, so I'll just go ahead and increase the size more. Let's do this. Yeah, looks perfect. Okay, so this is ready. Now we are actually going to animate our camera as well, right? So let's click on our camera. But before that, let's add a few more things. So first of all, these cylinders that you see has no textures on that. So let's just go ahead and add that brick texture that we created for the original, like this brick texture material that we created here. We're just gonna go ahead and add it to the cylinder as well, right? So let's add that, and let's copy it over to the rest of them as well. To copy it over, all you have to do is click on Control N and link material, right? So as soon as you do that, can you see it's already applied here? So it's taken care of. Let's make sure the scale is applied. Okay, so and the reason we do it to the cylinders as well, just to make sure that our back, like the cylinders are not just creating any weird contrast in our view, right? So once we are done with that, we'll add a cube to add a little bit of volume in there. So let's go ahead and go to mesh cube, sorry, not circle, mesh cube, and we'll bring it to the center and scale it on y-axis, and just to make sure that we're covering the entire tunnel, right? And let's add a volume shader to it, and to do that, we'll go to shading, hit new, we'll delete this principal BSDF, we'll go to shader, go to principal volume, and take this volume and put it in the volume output of this thing. Right now it looks completely black, and that's because first of all, volume is way too much, so we reduce it to 0.02, and we don't have any lights in our scene, right? So we'll add a light. Let's add a point light in here, and let's just move it on a little bit back, right? And I'll increase the volts of these lights. So let's do 100. Let's move it a little bit more back. Okay, this looks good enough. I'll change the color to be a little slightly bluish, and let's decrease the radius so that, yeah, and then increase this to 200 so that we have some good lights in our scene. Now we'll add another light, but we'll add it somewhere towards the end, right? So let's duplicate this light first and move it behind. Now this light needs to be really bright, so just go like overboard, and we'll change it to somewhat this color. Now, as you can see, there are two different contrasts in your scene, right? And it seems like there's a bright scene at the end of the tunnel, like a light at the end of the tunnel, as the saying goes. But yeah, let's change that intensity. Okay, looks pretty cool to me. Now we'll go ahead and select both of these lights and parent it to a camera. So we'll select those lights first, then select our camera, and select our camera, and then click Control P and Object. So as soon as I do that, so whenever I move my camera now, the lights will move with it, right? So just to make sure that we have that constant light being applied like within our scene, and we don't have a different light, or our camera just is not passing through the light altogether. So that will help us avoid that. So yeah, once that is done, now we'll animate our camera, and the only animation we need to do is move our camera, right? So first of all, we'll add a keyframe to its location, and then let's move it around, like, let's say 8 meters on the y-axis, and add another keyframe. Sorry, let's go towards the end first. 201, and add another keyframe here. So our original keyframe would be at 0. Seems like it didn't get applied. Okay, now let's go back to the camera view, and if I look at it, it looks pretty cool. And if you see the blurriness, it's only gonna show up in the viewport because it's not rendering it properly. But when you render the final product, it's just gonna look more clearer than this, right? So we have this ready now. Just making sure that I have everything that I need. Okay, the last thing that you'll actually do is go to your world and just reduce it to 0. We don't want any light from our world coming in. So yeah, there we go. This is as simple as that. This is how you go ahead and add your like create this basic animation loop of this tunnel, and yeah, you can use it as a background in any of your different projects. That if you want to create something sci-fi or something cinematic, I'll make another video a week after that, which probably shows you how we can do some animation in the text, and then I'll probably try and club both of these together to show you a pretty like show you the trailer that I'm actually going to make for my channel. I don't like the one that I have right now, but I'll just combine both of those, and then yeah, maybe you can take some ideas from it and apply it into your own channel. But I guess that's about it for this video today. I will be creating another mythic gun next week, and like this will be the pattern going forward. So one week I'll create a tutorial, and the other week I'll go back to creating my concept arts, because concept arts really actually take a lot of time to make, and I given my schedule, I'm not really getting a lot of rest because of how like if I keep producing them every week. So I'll just like having them like or creating them every alternate week will give me some time to breathe, and plus I can bring in more educational content for you guys. So if you do like these kind of videos, let me know down in the comment section. Please make sure to like the video, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much for hanging out so far.
We'll go through the wastelands, through the highways, till my shadow turns to sun rays. And